The most powerful man in the world is not Joe Biden, not Elon Musk, not Vladimir Putin, but this guy right here, Larry Fink. You're probably wondering,
who is this guy?
He's the puppet master behind big tech, governments, the mainstream media, war outcomes, countries, and the entire supply of the US dollar. Have you ever wondered who countries like the US are in debt to? Well, all the debt is owed to none other than Larry Fink. There's a saying to follow the money. Well, all the money is going to BlackRock, and you're about to find out how.
One day stronger! One day longer! One day stronger!
Yeah, you tell me why it's fair for somebody like BlackRock to make millions or billions, and then the people that mine the coal be sick and dying with black lung.
This is the New York City Police Department. You are unlawfully in the roadway and obstructing vehicular traffic.
They're trying to demonize issues. If you do not have a lens towards decarbonization, you're not going to win one euro of business.
On paper, BlackRock is an asset management firm that controls $10 trillion in assets. That's right, $10 trillion. That's almost half of the entire GDP of the United States. But even though you know how much $10 trillion is, you probably don't understand the pure magnitude of power that BlackRock has. After the 2008 financial crisis, people have begun to invest more and more in passive assets. Index funds like the S&P 500 are almost common household knowledge now. The firm that has been reaping all the profit from index funds is none other than BlackRock. BlackRock is the company that literally owns the world. You know that little war that has been going on? That's right, the Russia-Ukraine war. The entire war is being controlled by BlackRock, and it all centers down to Larry Fink. When the Russia-Ukraine war broke out in March of last year, one man had to speak his thoughts to the public. It wasn't Biden or Zelensky, it was Fink. And what he said in the letter mimicked exactly what the Biden administration said. 6 months after that, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, met with none other than Mr. Larry Fink. 2 months later, another meeting took place. This meeting was hosted by the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. And guess who they were meeting with? Again, it was none other than Fink himself. And this time, it was serious. The Ministry of Economy of Ukraine signed a memorandum declaring BlackRock as the advisor for Ukraine's investment framework. It was all so ridiculous, but nobody even scratched their heads to wonder, how is an American company literally controlling Ukraine's finances? 1 month after that, Zelensky had another meeting with Fink again. According to Ukraine's official website, Zelensky and Fink agreed on a groundbreaking agreement. BlackRock would control Ukraine's economy and the entire future of its redevelopment. Zelensky even announced that BlackRock leaders would visit Ukraine in 2023. In January of 2023, Ukraine announced that it is now raising money for what will become the biggest reconstruction since World War II. The total cost of the construction will be $1 trillion. That's a lot of money, and there's one man profiting from it all, Larry Fink. Zelensky even specifically mentioned how BlackRock executives aided in his announcement. Fink himself stated that he was looking for a quote-unquote fair and just return. The media stated that BlackRock appeared to be upbeat, not because the war would end, but because they would finally see returns in their Ukrainian investments. BlackRock essentially owns Ukraine, but that doesn't even begin to reveal the extent of BlackRock's power.
What I'm trying to say is, many people believe social values or environmental issues are political and woke. I don't believe that.
You know Biden's senior advisor on the Russia-Ukraine war? Well, he came directly from BlackRock. The government officials all reek of BlackRock. Take Brian Deese as an example of this. He runs a National Economic Council and came straight from BlackRock. Take a look at Adewale Adeyemo, the Deputy Treasury Secretary, who also came from BlackRock. Even Kamala Harris's Chief Economic Advisor, Mike Pyle, was BlackRock's former Chief Investment Strategist. You might ask, how is it possible that all these government officials came from BlackRock? Well, BlackRock's strategy is simple. They first hire government officials and have them work at BlackRock for a few years. Those same officials are then persuaded to leave BlackRock to work for the government once again. This strategy transitions unbiased officials to corrupt ones in favor of BlackRock. Everyone knows that government officials don't make much money. Now that BlackRock has paid them handsomely, they are now in debt to BlackRock. All three of the people I just mentioned previously worked for Obama. They were then hired to work for BlackRock, where they worked for a few years. Now they work for Joe Biden and are biased in favor of BlackRock. If the war were to continue, BlackRock would be in a prime position to make the most money out of Ukraine. Because of BlackRock's government officials, the war is still going on, and so is BlackRock's money printing machine. But BlackRock's true power comes from something entirely different. To understand the true scale of this operation, we have to take a closer look at the relationship between the US government and BlackRock.
You're somebody who knows political leaders very well, not only in Washington, but around the world. And I just wonder what you think about what happened last week and what's happened since.
BlackRock's true power goes far beyond just the $10 trillion that they manage. And that's because of their deep ties to the US government. During the pandemic, the Federal Reserve went to one man to ask for advice, Larry Fink. Fink happened to give the Fed advice that allowed him to make billions. In response to the pandemic, the Fed began buying huge amounts of corporate bonds and corporate bond ETFs. That was a shocking turn of events, because the Fed has never bought ETFs or corporate bonds before. But upon tapping into BlackRock for advice, the Fed decided to start buying corporate bonds. You see, there's something wrong here. Those same corporate bonds and corporate bond ETFs are owned and run by none other than Larry Fink. Out of the 16 ETFs that the Fed purchased during the pandemic, 8 of them were BlackRock's funds. This allowed BlackRock's share in the corporate bond market to go from 51 to 56% in the span of 3 months. Fink will tell you that he waived the fees for the Fed's holdings, and that's true. But BlackRock is still profiting from other investors pouring into BlackRock ETFs as a result of being associated with the Fed. Don't take my word for it. Take it from Bharat Ramamurthy, a member of the congressional body who oversaw the Fed's stimulus programs. Even if BlackRock waives its fees from the purchases that the Fed is making, the fact that it is associated with this program means that other investors are going to rush into BlackRock funds. BlackRock obviously generates fees from those flows, so the net result is that this is very lucrative for BlackRock. Michael Rosen, the CIO of Angelus Investments, backed this up by saying, "It's not that complicated really. The Fed says, we're buying this. Okay, then I'm gonna buy it too." Because of his influence on the Fed's bond purchases, Fink can be to blame for the extreme inflation that we're still dealing with today. It's not just the pandemic that BlackRock profited from though. Larry Fink also used his corrupt power to make billions of dollars from a housing crash. Yeah, that's right. I'm talking about the 2008 recession.
Lehman Brothers is going bankrupt, and financial markets from Asia to Europe are doing their utmost to prevent Monday from turning from dark to black.
Wall Street is clearly worried. The Dow plunged nearly 680 points today, or 7.7%.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. Let's talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
This was the time a decade ago when the financial crisis erupted, a crash that most experts did not foresee.
BlackRock in particular made some unbelievably crucial moves. Larry Fink comes to the fore. I mean, it's a remarkable ride.
In the 2008 recession, banks were crumbling down as mortgage-backed securities fell apart. When Bear Stearns, the Lehman Brothers, AIG, and many other financial firms went down, the government contracted one man to solve the crisis, Larry Fink. And just like every other time, there was a huge conflict of interest here. The same firms that the government wanted BlackRock to help bail out were the same firms that BlackRock held hundreds of billions of dollars of shares in. But even beyond that, there was also another conflict of interest at play. One of the key government programs that BlackRock facilitated was the Public-Private Investment Program, or the PPIP. The program facilitated the purchase of toxic assets like mortgage-backed securities. Many people blindly say that BlackRock helped bail out financial firms through this program, but they're missing some key information. BlackRock is also a financial firm, and as a result, they were incentivized to just buy as many mortgage-backed securities as possible. And that's exactly what they did. So in essence, BlackRock is to blame not just for the money printing in the pandemic, but also in 2008. The result of BlackRock's buying program was Fink gaining trillions of dollars in assets over the following decade. Now that Fink controls $10 trillion, he essentially owns the world through the shares that he owns.
But we're asking for better disclosure. And I don't think there's anything wrong about asking for better disclosure across the board.
How did BlackRock specifically, how did they mislead investors?
Collusion with this climate action partnership is essentially create a climate cartel.
You know those environmental, social, and governance movements? I'm talking about the woke, low carbon emission, and social justice movements. Those ESG movements are all a result of BlackRock. When BlackRock has an index fund involved in ESG investing, they are able to charge higher fees. And because of that reason, Larry Fink has been forcing companies to move towards ESG. As we mentioned earlier, BlackRock basically owns the world. They're one of the biggest shareholders in companies like Nike, Meta, Apple, you name it. That gives them voting rights and pricing power in all the company's decisions. If BlackRock were to sell its holdings in a stock, that stock would drop 10 or even 20% immediately. So because ESG allows BlackRock to generate higher fees, Larry Fink has been forcing companies to increase their ESG score. In early 2018, Larry Fink sent a message to the world's largest public companies. The letter demanded that all companies demonstrate how they are making a positive contribution to society. If companies didn't do so, then Fink threatened to sell BlackRock's entire stake. The entire world was shocked by such a bold threat. Jeffrey Sonnenfeld from Yale called it a lightning rod for sure for major institutions investing other people's money. It is huge for an institutional investor to take this position across his portfolio. Nothing like it. It's truly frightening that BlackRock can take such a powerful stance on the 4,897 stocks that the company owns. But what we're looking at is the only public stance that BlackRock has taken. Behind the scenes, BlackRock has been taking extremely political stances with its votes. For instance, we've seen BlackRock vote in favor of activist investors like Nelson Peltz and Bill Ackman. The reason why this matters so much is that BlackRock is not acting in the interest of the company, but rather its own profits. BlackRock doesn't care if ESG investing lowers the quality of its funds. All they care about is raising fees and making more money. Companies worldwide are now constantly working to improve their ESG score through woke ads, all because of Fink. This is done through an ad supporting social justice or changing a logo to fit Pride Month. But don't take my word for it. Listen to Peter Thiel, one of the greatest venture capitalists and investors of all time.
You have some, you have true believers, and you have people who are just in some kind of racket to rip other people off, and then you have a lot of useful idiots as well. And so you have sort of these. Often you have these three different contingents we have to probably analyze. So I know for every Greta, there's a Larry Fink at BlackRock who's just trying to package up these index funds so he can charge. If you just had an index fund, you couldn't charge as much as if you have an ESG index fund. It sounds like you're doing a lot more work. So that's sort of the racket version is BlackRock. The autistic child leading the children's crusade. That's probably the true believer, and then probably most people are neither and are just the useful idiots.
You might be wondering how BlackRock has so much power over the companies they own large stakes in. We already talked about a more obvious method, which is through voting rights, but BlackRock has another trick up its sleeve. Because ownership of public companies has to be disclosed by law, BlackRock has accumulated significant control through a terrifying loophole. This loophole is called circular ownership. Circular ownership is when a company owns another organization that owns the company. So if BlackRock wanted to gain more control in Bank of America, they would just purchase Berkshire Hathaway shares, which own Bank of America stock. This means that if BlackRock were to suddenly dump all their Berkshire Hathaway shares, Bank of America's share price would tank. So that means that if Bank of America didn't follow Fink's rules, he would simply just dump both Bank of America and Berkshire Hathaway shares. This would cause the price of Bank of America to drop much more than publicly disclosed. Such activity allows BlackRock to gain immeasurable power beyond its own ownership. The total worth of the companies in BlackRock's portfolio adds up to $261 trillion, almost 3 times more than the entire world's GDP. So imagine how shocking Fink's message in 2018 was. He instantly changed the practices of companies worth a total that's 3 times more than the world GDP. But BlackRock doesn't just control governments, they also own entire governments. As Fink's operations have been expanding, so have his efforts to control the government. Fink has been spending more and more money on lobbying. Most recently, in 2022, he increased BlackRock's lobbying spend by 63% year over year. This allows him to secure key government deals that allow him to profit even more. For instance, in 2020, when BlackRock secured a deal to advise the EU on bank regulations, EU citizens were left confused. Those banks that were supposed to be regulated are the same banks that BlackRock owned immense amounts of shares in. Such blatant corruption led many to protest against BlackRock and force a revision of the deal. But the question remains, how did BlackRock even secure such a deal in the first place? It's all because BlackRock's lobbying intensively controls a variety of different groups and lawmakers. It's so convoluted that it would take me an entirely different video to go over the intricacies. As mentioned earlier, BlackRock has countless former employees in high-ranking political positions. This allows the company to essentially control the government. From 2016 to 2020, BlackRock won 9 contracts with the European Commission, and it was all because of the company's corrupt officials. So now we know that Larry Fink owns wars, companies, and governments, but he also has control over something even more powerful.
Aladdin supports every single part of the asset management process. It is a collection of systems and software that are all hooked together that support portfolio managers, traders, analysts, operations folks to perform the front-to-back actions of an asset manager.
Your personal data is not just important to you, it's extremely valuable to companies, and BlackRock probably already has most of your data. BlackRock's proprietary investment software platform called Aladdin basically controls the entire world's investments. BlackRock Aladdin controls $24 trillion, which is a quarter of the total world GDP. Aladdin uses various sources of data to accurately estimate risk and find new opportunities. Aladdin is so powerful because it collects immeasurable data from any data source it can get its hands on. Aladdin likely already knows so much about you: what food you eat, what house you own, what your dog's favorite treat is, you name it. With control of this data comes enormous responsibilities. But instead of protecting such important data, BlackRock has been sitting side by side with the Chinese Communist Party. BlackRock has officially become the first company to operate a Chinese mutual fund business with its $1 billion fund. This sounds fine on the surface, but people like George Soros can see through these shady schemes. Soros criticized BlackRock's Chinese initiative as a tragic mistake that will damage the national security interests of the US and other democracies. It's terrifying how a company like BlackRock, with all the data it has through Aladdin, is so close to the largest authoritarian government. We've already demonstrated that BlackRock has a history of looking for its own interest and only its own interest. So what do you think will happen when BlackRock teams up with President Xi Jinping? BlackRock certainly isn't a non-profit venture, as I've already demonstrated. All this is frightening for you and me, but entire countries are even more terrified than us. That's because of the debt that they've piled on. I mean, have you ever wondered why countries pile on so much debt year after year? It's because that money is being lent to BlackRock. And BlackRock is advising the government's financial decisions. So BlackRock is advising governments to pile on debt, but is also loaning money to themselves at the same time. This is done through government bonds, which are basically just bundled debt packages. This is because bonds just package government debt into smaller financial vehicles that BlackRock can make interest from. Take a look at Zambia's debt crisis, which BlackRock profited 110% from. Zambia is in a humongous debt crisis, so it would make sense for a company as large as BlackRock to help out. But BlackRock, which is Zambia's largest bondholder, has done the exact opposite. BlackRock has refused to suspend Zambia's debt payments. This essentially forces Zambia to pay its debt or fall apart. Larry Fink isn't stupid though. It's not Zambia that he's profiting from at the end of the day. It's the UK and the other G20 countries that have to support Zambia. BlackRock only owns $220 million in Zambian bonds. They have trillions of dollars, and the interest payments are nothing to them. At this point in the video, you're probably confused about how you've never heard of it. That's because it's all being covered behind the scenes by the mainstream media, which BlackRock owns as well. BlackRock and Vanguard own 18% of Fox, 16% of CBS, 13% of Comcast, 12% of CNN, and 12% of Disney. Just for reference, BlackRock also partially owns Vanguard. So now you can see why BlackRock is the most powerful company in the world. And the man behind it all is Larry Fink. If you want to see more interesting and sometimes terrifying business essay videos like this, please hit the like and subscribe button. My mission is to cover topics that the mainstream media will never touch, and it's only possible with your support.